Welcome to another episode of Inside the Mavs. Kevin Gray, Mavs Insider for 105 through the Fan, joined as always by my partner, Grant Afseth of Mavs SI. Appreciate you joining us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts for free. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube as well, really appreciate you joining us. However, and wherever you may be listening to us, got a special episode today. Really excited for our guests that we're going to be having on the program with us here. Before we bring in our guest, Grant, what's going on? How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. We haven't talked in a little while, just about under 24 hours.
I know, right? Exactly. For those who are checked out our last podcast, we just did one here just a couple of days ago, and now we're back at it again because joining us on the program today in Slovenia, I'm so excited. I couldn't believe. I was like, look, we got to find a way to get him on the podcast. We got to find out a way to work out the time, and we were able to do so. He's a contributor for DMag covering the Dallas Mavericks. I like to call him one of the smartest basketball minds that I know. So excited to have him on. You can find him on Twitter at Iztok_Franko. Iztok Franko joining us here on Inside the Mavs. Iztok, a pleasure having you on the podcast. How you doing, man?
Doing great. Like we chatted a little bit before this talk, so enjoying the off season. So,
unfortunately, I guess an early off season for the Mavericks in that case. But here we are, being able to still talk about the Mavs anyway. In that case, right?
Yeah. It's an early off season, longer than planned, but like I said, everything has also positive sides. So hopefully, like some of the guys who are on the Mavs, like Luka, I think hopefully taking extended off season to work on our, let's say, off season plans and game for the next season. So at least that's my plan. We'll see for Luka.
That's right. We'll see for Luka. And I mean, let's just start there because obviously it was a disappointing season for this team, finishing 38-44 outside of the play-in and not making the playoffs. But Luka having arguably statistically the best season of his career. As you watched and evaluated Luka throughout the course of the year, dealt with a little bit of injury as well throughout the course of the season, what did you make as talk of his overall performance as a player, how he grew, and some of the things that you still want to see from him as a player?
Yeah, I think it was another, let's say, wild season from him, right? So especially how he started, I remember it was probably, I think it was around December or January. There was like, I think last off season, I did like playing with some models, with some data, just trying to project his peak. And what we saw in December and January was basically he exceeded what was projected as his peak, let's say, individual statistic, which was wild, yeah, because he made like such a leap in terms of scoring efficiency, a lot of things, even some of the advanced metrics. I don't know that I think people are now more in line with or recognize them more because of Jokic and his MVP arguments are always done based on these advanced metrics. When you saw Luka's numbers for the first 3-4 months of the season, they were up there. And then I think after the All-Star break, when he started, with some injury problems, and then this last month and a half, I think there was a decline, to be honest. Yeah, so I think some of these otherwise overall great numbers. I think scoring-wise, he was still there, but some of the efficiencies and some other things, mostly also, let's say, on-court impact in terms of plus-minus or adjusted plus-minus, I think was something that declined a little bit. But so it was basically a story of two parts. And I think it's kind of correlated with the overall Mavericks season. I think they were trying to play catch up from the beginning, from the last off season. Some of the things that didn't go through. I mean, everybody's talking about Brunson situation, some of the signings. So I think he was carrying quite a heavy load. And then I think this catch up and the load, I think, caught up to him at the end of the season.
Yeah, something that, just remembering comments from, Kyrie Irving throughout the season, he kind of mentioned that He's, being a midseason trade pickup, he wanted to kind of be like within what the Mavericks are already doing, as opposed to like changing up a lot of things. And he highlighted like training camp being super important and like early season period to kind of work through some things. How much of an impact do you think, assuming, like, let's just factor in Kyrie Irving for a second, he returns to the team and just like, after a full off season, what do you see the benefits to like having that training camp and that early season with like the team you're starting with and finishing with for Luka's like sort of like sustainable impact for next season?
No, for sure. I think this is one of the reasons you get Kyrie, right? So to take some of that burden. I think at the end of the season, problem was also they were both kind of struggling with injuries. So there was some games when Luka was not 100% and Kyrie was not 100%, and their margin for error was so small and not because of scoring, mostly because of other areas like rebounding and defense. So that was the main issue. But I think looking into the next season, we'll also see what they do offense-wise, because we saw some changes there with Gregson Jean leaving. I don't know who will they bring on the coaching staff to help. So we'll see how it's the time when you implement, like, let's say, new schemes or new principles on offense, which is basically how you can get even more out of them. But I think also rotations and all these things, I think the main benefit will be from Luka. So not needing to score. If you remember that stretch in January when they won 7 straight, he was like scoring 50 points per game or 40 points per game. That was like, so I think that's the benefit of having Kyrie, right? So you don't need to do that. So hopefully or if you remember again last season, they had really hard time sitting Luka for back-to-back games, like with the rest plan. Every game they set him, they were like always around 500, and they lost every single game in the beginning of the season. So I think these are the areas where Kyrie helps for sure. And also I think in terms of chemistry, I think especially end of games, more chemistry, how to pace himself during the games. I think that was a little bit of a change for Luka, because he would typically start with very high usage first quarter, playing the full quarter. I think he was leading the NBA in scoring, in shots. So these are some of the things that I think playing with Kyrie, he can learn from him as well, how to pace himself a little bit better to have impact or to be more impactful when it matters at the end of the games.
When you look at how this team is built, assuming that Kyrie is back, how would you assemble a roster around Luka and Kyrie, given their offensive games and what you would want to see built around those two to maximize both of them in terms of efficiency, but also for these other players around them to be able to have the kind of impact based on what the two of them can do offensively for them?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a tricky situation, especially with the new CBA, not only for the Mavericks, but for the whole NBA. I think it looks like NBA is going into this two max guys model with the new CBA. And ideally, you have the optimal mix or fit of your two superstars or two guys on max contracts, which I'm assuming Kyrie will be and Luka will be. So basically, you can count like from $90 to $100 million for both of these two guys. So I think the fit in terms of offense and defense between the two of them, it's not optimal in terms of, I don't know, if you compare to some others like Miami with Bam and Jimmy, or if you compare to Denver with Jokic and Murray. But they are such an amazing individual scorers, and this is what matters in the playoffs. So I think now if you look at Miami, how they struggle to create advantage, they don't have a guy even like Kyrie in that regard, not two of these guys like Kyrie and Luka. So there are challenges, but there are also some, let's say, I would say, a luxury that Mavericks have that other teams don't have, especially when I say scoring and individual scoring, shot creation. So going back to your question, I think they'll need to find rebounding and size and length and defense, which is like an obvious things to say, but it's basically where they struggled last season, especially after the trade. I did this analysis where they were like one of the smallest teams in the NBA, and where their rebounding fell off a cliff. So they were like playing up position, each of these guys. So I think they need size and length. I mean, the big position, center position, has been a problem for last, I don't know how many years, but they also need some length. I mean, with Dorian gone, he was like the only really impactful defender with length, and I think they need to surround them with impactful defenders. I was tweeting at this when the all defense voting came up. So I think it was last 11 years. I looked since Tyson Chandler, basically. The Mavericks didn't have like really a game-changing defender, somebody who would even come close to make any of the, I don't know, second team all defense. So if you sum all these votes from last 11 years or 12 years together, you could not get one all defense spot. And I think they need to, if you have like these two incredible offensive talents, you need to find also some defensive talent, and not just like average, which, I don't know, Reggie Bullock or I wouldn't say Dorian was average, but he wasn't like elite defender if you compare to some other wings. So I think they will need to find this and surround them with like 2 or 3 impactful defenders, ideally 3. I don't think they will. I don't know if they can do that in one off season, but I think they need to make this first step, at least in this off season, to at least add 1 or 2 of these guys.
And to improve the, speaking of defense, like, between rim protection and perimeter size, what do you see as being the top priority for, like, which one would be a more impactful first move to kind of address, like, between, like a rim protector or like, more of like a bigger, like 4 that can kind of be that like low man and the like switch defender. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if you look what's happening in the playoffs, I would say an elite big is like the way to go, but it's really hard to get Anthony Davis or even Bam, So they are not like these guys.
They're not just growing on trees.
Yeah. So but these are the guys that really move the needle. So basically, if you watch what the Lakers did, Anthony Davis was basically the reason why they had like elite defense the whole playoffs. So you can see how much an impactful big can do. So ideally you choose that, but it's also, I think, if I go back to comparison with Denver, I think they will need to also find, defenders that fit with Luka. Like Jokic, I think Luka has his limitations. So I don't know, typically, and I think a big that's like just a rim protector that cannot switch, that's not mobile, I don't think works well with Luka or even with Kyrie, because they're not really. If you have 2 guards or 2 guys in the lineup who are not like putting pressure on ball, it's hard to then drop back. So that's one thing. So I think, to go back, Grant, I think probably I would go with rim protection and like size at center spot. But I don't know if that's feasible. But ideally, at least 1 or 2 good wings and a serviceable wing, which if big, if it's not a rim protector, I think we need to cover the rebounding gap. I think that's one thing that's really hurting Dallas on both sides of the floor, not only defensively, but also offensively. Because if you look at the last 4 or 5 years, they've been elite half-court offense, like first, second, fifth, or first last 4 years, basically since Luka's rookie season, but they don't get any second chances. So I think even on offense, there is an opportunity with rebounding to improve.
Speaking of bigs, obviously that's a huge need for this team. I can't not have a Mavs podcast and not ask you about probably the most polarizing figure from this past season in Christian Wood, because it felt like Iztok for a lot of Mavs fans. On one hand, he was a guy that provided a lot of different elements on offense, but obviously defensively was not exactly what you wanted him to be. Why didn't this ultimately work with Christian Wood and the Dallas Mavericks, given some of the talent that he has, but also the inability on the defensive end at times that I'm sure drove you and a lot of Mavericks fans mad throughout the course of this past season?
Yeah, I think because of the issues they had, like mostly on defense, he's not the guy that would solve that. I think in my opinion, he's most suited like for off the bench, or let's say a scoring role, can be even in 25, 30 minute slots. This is when he was playing the best. They play like that. But I think the other issues kind of exposed some of his flaws, which not necessarily, I think they were magnified on this team. So I think, again, if he would be surrounded with, I don't know, an anchor big or somebody who's be like a backbone, not only in terms of, let's say, not only in terms of physical things, but also in terms of communication, in terms of guidance, I think he would do much better. But I think with this team, it was, I mean, his biggest benefit is scoring, and especially once they got Kyrie, I think this was not as needed as at the beginning of the season. And then obviously, I think there was, you could see it with the coaching staff. There was never from the get-go, there was never a true buy-in from, I don't know if it's from both sides, but at least from the coaching side, I don't think that was really that. So I think if you look at Jason Kidd and his history, what kind of players I think he wants, it's like more this defensive minded wings, bigs. So I think that was part of the things why it didn't work out.
Are there any, like just looking at, and I know it's a little early, but are there any options that you think would kind of fit what Jason Kidd looks for like kind of a veteran trade target this offseason?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think in terms of, I don't know, in terms of names, I think we need to think a little bit, or think it a little bit through. But if you saw which guys he played, let's say the season before, it was Reggie, Dodo, Maxi. So these are the guys he trusted the most, also in the playoffs. They were the guys that played heavy minutes. So Dwight Powell was not in rotation. Tim Hardaway Jr. was injured during that run. So I think you probably need to look in guys in that mold. So guys who can defend, guys who are like professionals, let's say vets. I think they were probably looking for vets. So I don't know in terms of what's available or what is there for Dallas. Will be interesting. For example, a name like Dylan Brooks, who is probably available, because that was one of the things that we saw last season. They kind of took on some guys that are maybe not necessarily in the mold of Jalen Brunson, or in terms of, I don't know, Maxi, or even Dorian, or Reggie, in terms of locker room presence, more like these extravagant guys like McGee, Wood, even Kyrie in some sense. So they are, I think, I don't know if it's the coaching staff, I don't know if it's the front office or both together, but they show that they are like willing to take so-called risk on a guy that are maybe not ideal, or maybe they have some problems in the past, let's say chemistry locker room wise. But I think that's the profile I would say that would probably Jason Kidd would love to have, like really impactful in your face defender, somebody like that on the wing.
And let's stick with Jason Kidd for a second, because obviously as someone who understands the numbers and how some of this stuff breaks down, and some of the, the matchups and some of the things we see from defensive and offensive efficiency, where are you with Jason Kidd as a head coach for this team based on what he did in his first year and things really kind of falling apart in his second year? Where do you stand with Jason Kidd when it comes to him being the head coach of this team?
I mean, it's hard to judge in a way because you don't know what's going behind the scenes and how the chemistry works and all these things. But I think his biggest, let's say, strength, or also why he is the coach of this team, is his ability to relate to Luka, I would assume, yeah, and now Kyrie. So offense-wise, I think every coach will struggle with Luka until he will adjust slowly, or he will adjust to, let's say, I think offensively you will play a certain brand of basketball if you have Luka Doncic on your team, you know. But there, I think I would still not give up on trying to change, or to change him slowly, you know. So that, I think, is one thing. Defensively, I think season prior we saw what could be done, especially together with Sean Sweeney. So I think the system, the schemes that they implemented, or what they got out of that roster, I think was very good. But last year, I think it went kind of downhill, also because of how the roster was, and also especially after the trade. So I think it was certainly not a roster, and he told several times, I think one of his comments, I think Grant will know better, was, I think, with this, if we have this roster or something like that, it was when he was talking about defense, he was saying, I think, if this is the roster that we have, we will have to, I don't know, do something. So I think he was certainly not pleased. So we'll see. I mean, he has this, let's say, baggage of year 2, year 3 from his prior stints. So I think this is something that's aware. And I think, to me, it will be interesting, because there are talks about, I don't know, getting Frank Vogel or somebody else, somebody senior on his staff. And I think it was a little bit surprising to me, because I think if you look what happened with the coaching staff in the last year, it was mostly the guys that he was very comfortable with, you know, from his prior stints, and mostly junior guys, yeah, apart from Sweeney, which has like a longer stint as an assistant. So I think the pressure is on for everybody. You know, we were talking about Luka, we were talking about front office, and I think it's also with Jason Kidd. So I probably together they need the trade for Kyrie, and this is, we'll probably talk about draft, and I wrote, you know, something that was also polarizing about that. So I think, you know, every move they made, Kyrie trade, the things that are happening in front office, adding Dennis Lindsey to Nico Harrison, the things that we are speculating about the coaching staff, I think all this gives me the impression that this team is really under a strong mandate to win next season. And so I think everybody, Luka, Jason Kidd, the front office, will need to probably get some of the ego and step back and try to make it work, you know.
And in terms of like pressure to win, you know, I remember reading about, I believe you wrote about, you know, trading the 10th pick for a veteran as opposed to hanging on to it due to like the success rate of, like, you know, like previous 10 picks and like just the lottery in general.
That got the people going too.
Yeah, for sure. What were some of your main takeaways for people that might not have saw that when you were kind of researching the history of the 10th pick in the lottery, that would make you kind of like give an opinion one way or another, like whether you think it should be traded or whether they should hang on to it?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think they should trade it, or that was, let's say, a little bit of editorial twist at the end, so it was a little bit more, you know, how that worked. But I think my main theory, or my main, let's say, thought process, because, as I said, the things that I mentioned before, all these things, everybody you talk to near the Mavericks will tell you they are in win now mode, you know. So, and typically the 10th pick or any other pick, if you look at the history last 20 whatever years, typically even if it succeeds, it will take you at least one for the best. I don't know, guys like Paul George, which is like 99% of the outcome for the 10th pick, you know. Even he started contributing in year 2. For most of the other guys is year 3, year 4. and this is like end of Luka's extension. So that was one thing. And the other thing is, I think if you look at the assets, like we were talking before, what are the gaps the team needs to improve? It's like they need to find like at least 2 quality starters, I would say. So it's a wing, something like that. And if you look at the assets that they have the 10th pick, they have the 27th pick, they have 2 young players in Josh Green, Hardy, and assumably Hardaway Jr., So they have some assets, but they don't have that many chips, So if you want, I think Kyrie trade and some other things in the past took the luxury of risk, I would say, away from this team. And some people would say building through the draft is the safe path, and it's the best path, it's organic path, and I agree 100%. But this is if you do it like on a long-term basis, if you have like 3-4 first-round picks and you invest in draft process, and I think you hope one or two of these guys will pan out. But if you have one pick and you need certainty, a starter, somebody who will contribute, I'm not sure this team has a luxury to gamble if they will get a quality starter out of it, and also the luxury of waiting for 2-3 years. So that was my thought process. And in terms of outcomes, we did this. I also posted this on Twitter. So I think 50 picks from 8 to 20 in that range for last, I think, 10 years. Let's say 15 or 20. Let's say 15 guys are what we would say like a clear-cut starters. So this is like 20 to 30% chance. Which is okay. I mean, it's okay, but still, I think what Dallas needs or what this team needs is like sure starter, I would say. so that was my thought process. Of course, there is, and this is what is exciting about these lottery picks, is there is a possibility that the guy will turn out to be, I don't know, Tyrese Halliburton or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or, I don't know, Mikal Bridges or, I don't know, even Miles Turner. So these are like the top outcomes of these guys that I was saying, like guys picked from 8 till 20 the last 10 years. But these are like 3 guys out of 50. I don't know, the median, or let's say the average outcome is a guy, I don't know, in the range, I don't know, of Jakob Poeltl, So he was a guy. So let's say this is your average outcome. And if you ask now fans, nobody would trade the 10th pick for Jakob Poeltl. And even him became what he is, let's say an average starting big, a great rebounder, a good defender, but he became that like after 5-6 years. So this was, I think this is the thought process behind. I'm like you guys, I'm also excited about some of the guys in this draft class because we are talking about length, we are talking about size. So there are guys there, but I think this excitement and the value of the pick, because NBA franchises look at it that way as well. I think it has the highest value before you make the pick. Once you make the pick, it's your pick. If you don't trade it on the draft night, then I think you need to give it like a year or two to show that the guy. First, you need to give him playing time. And we saw that going back to Jason Kidd and what kind of guys he wants to play. So he wants to play the vets, especially if there will be a mandate to win next season, which I think will be. So assuming they don't trade Josh Green or Jaden Hardy, which we all love, I'm not really sure Jason Kidd will play like 3 under 22 guys or 23-year-old Josh Green and 21-year-old Jaden Hardy and a rookie, which will be 19 or 20 extended minutes. So to me, it's just not something that I would expect. And it's not just Jason Kidd, The Mavericks plan to be a playoff team, and if you look at the playoff team, I think Tyrese Maxey was the only guy in second round who was like really playing extended minutes and was 21 or younger, So that's the reality of the NBA, that typically young players are not contributors in the first 2-3 years. Now, if that's the right path, that they are in this win now mode, that's a different question. So should the Mavericks take a step back and build organically? That's something. My whole theory of trading is I don't believe they will do that. So
yeah,
that's why I'm not expecting them to not trade it or to take a guy at 10th and wait and develop him.
it feels like because there's a lot of pressure, it feels like, on this 10th pick to either find a quality talent or to move it to be able to get a veteran piece. But I want to pose this to you, Iztok, because it feels like the Mavericks have been trying to catch up to a timeline that they didn't anticipate, because I hate to say it because it's not Luka's fault per se, but he got so damn good so fast that I feel like this team has been trying to catch up to him, to trying to get themselves aligned on a timeline that allows them to build not just for now, but also in the future to keep him not only happy, but competitive going forward. What have you felt about how the Mavericks have been going about trying to build around him based on the timeline that they're working with? Because he is already a 4-time All-NBA first team selection in that way.
Yeah, I mean, there have been ups and downs, yeah. So also, I mean, you look at the season before, they made the Western Conference Finals, which I think in year 4 is what I think you would expect if you were very positive about possibilities. I think last summer, and I mean, I agree with your theory that this expedited this, but I think even with a lot of the, let's say, missed opportunities in the off seasons and the trade deadlines since Luka got here, I think they still managed, they hit on some other things, mostly Jalen Brunson, yeah. And this is where I think it's not only Luka expedited development, but he was this second guy, this guy that they hit on, and him leaving, I think, made things much more complex. And also the situation that they are now. Of course, we can go back to, I don't know, to the Porzingis trade and the be there. I mean, these 2 picks, were they supposed to trade for him? Was it a gamble? But I think even with all that, I think last summer and what happened with Brunson, basically on the positive side, how he developed and what the player he is now. And on the other side, what happened, I think that was a step back. Because again, if I go back to Denver, for example, they had a core of Jokic and Murray, and this was, in a way, this is like very comparable with what Dallas had with Luka and Jalen. Yeah? And they added like Aaron Gordon, added KCP, Bruce Brown. So they added this, like, where we are talking about athletic, veteran wing defenders, guys who can play, who can do a little bit more. They surrounded Jokic with these guys. They also had Michael Porter Jr., but I think in theory, it would be easier with the Mavericks had this Jalen Brunson situation not happen, because now, yes, they added Kyrie, but they lost Dorian and they lost another first-round pick, which would be huge this summer if you could trade, I don't know, 27, 29. Even if you didn't have the 10th pick, I think that would be opportunity to add the core that got into the Western Conference Finals.
And in terms of the off season being like a longer off season, as we talked about before we started, what are the benefits do you see for Luka playing with the national team after having that extended time off? Is there anything you think would be beneficial for him to work on individually prior to the national team as well?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just the rest. I think, of course, his conditioning, his, I don't know, physical shape is always, or was like his first 4 years was always something that was talked about, and I think rightfully so. But part of it, of the physical part, is just this ongoing of playing basketball. I remember not only last year, even the year before. So it was like extended season because of the COVID. So playoffs ended later, and I think a week later, Luka went to this qualifying tournament for the Olympics. They won that tournament. Then they had like 2 weeks, another preparation, then the Olympics, and then directly to the training camp. And then the next season, it was the same with Eurobasket, long playoffs, Eurobasket. So I think for him, just to have I don't know, time to take away to rest his body, maybe work on physical conditioning and things, but just rest. And also I think mentally, probably think a little bit and reflect. I think last season was a disappointment, not for him. He also had like similar disappointing ending to the Eurobasket. So those were like two things where his was like his first two failures of his career, if you look at what happened before, So I think, and maybe also now watching his buddy Jokic, what he's doing, because he was the guy that went through similar criticism and to similar stage at the similar age. So a lot of the things that we talk about Luka was the same about Jokic when he was 24 or 23. So I think that aspect now, hopefully, I would assume also working on his conditioning, on his things. And I think in terms of playing with Slovenia, I think this is something, it's going to be shorter. It's going to be shorter in terms of less games, because last summer they also had some qualifying games. This was like this weird FIBA format. For Eurobasket, they also have qualifiers for the World Cup, so it was crazy. So I think this is going to be a little bit shorter, but travel-wise, this is where I see it's going to be a little bit more tricky, because the tournament, the World Cup, is in Asia. I think Slovenia will play in Japan. And then after that, I think Mavs plan to play in Spain and then in Abu Dhabi or in United Emirates. So that's the part I'm not that excited about. I mean, not excited from the exposure, but I think just from the traveling, because I think historically we saw that some of the teams in the past, when the NBA teams would go, I don't know, to play in China, they would typically start slower than the season. So this is the things that I think the Mavericks will need to take into the account. But hopefully for Luka, it's like a season that's, as I said, it's he can recover and he can get or start, let's say, on a good note when the new NBA season starts.
And I have to ask you, because for those of us who are in the States and have not had a chance to experience, international competition overseas, and obviously with you being Slovenian, can you just kind of paint a picture of what an atmosphere is like for Luka playing with the Slovenian national team, or just international competition where it feels like the passion of the game and the fandom is just so much more overseas than it feels like at times over here in the US? Can you kind of paint a picture of what that's like and what you've experienced in your time covering not just the Slovenian team, but just covering basketball and watching the game in general?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. And it's for sure, like you said, typically, especially, okay, we have, I think, the atmosphere, especially in this part of the world. I don't know, even in EuroLeague, in some places it gets crazy, even in the club basketball scene. But when it's come to national basketball, I think it's like fewer games, used to be less competition, so people would get really excited, and playing for the national team is like more like a patriotic things, even for the players. And here, Slovenia, this is where I think Luka is a little bit different, because he never, even from the start, he was always right for the front. I want to play. He always came to play. And I think it's like kind of his, getting in touch back with his country, being away. So also with some of if you look at his history, he went to Madrid when he was 13. So I don't think he had many friends and these things. So I think this for him is like a little bit of catching up on that front. So meeting with people that he knows, having a good time and enjoying and playing basketball. What I was trying to say before, also Slovenia, we had a problem in the past, with some of the NBA players. They didn't always come to play. So this was like people perceived them as like spoiled or stars. Even with Jokic last 2 years ago, I don't know if you remember, there was an article of Serbian people. They were like really angry of him because he took a summer off and didn't want to play. So with Luka, it's not that people are forcing him or that they would come to that, because every time he'll say right away, I will come and play. And people really appreciate that for him. So, and him being, I think, our first really global superstar, and I'm not talking about sports, I would say in general. So I think it's like an event. So I think Slovenia will play like a friendly game against Greece and Giannis in August here. So I think the arena is already sold out, because people don't experience to watch Luka, but also FIBA. I think it's taking these games now with all these stars. You have Giannis, you have Jokic, you have Luka, you have, I don't know, Lauri Markkanen. So they're trying to, I think, putting like these pre-tournaments and pre-games strategically, because it's a huge boost for the basketball here. So they get a lot of exposure, a lot of excitement.
In terms of like the team that Luka will be playing with Slovenia, has there been anything like meaningfully changed since the last time he played with them, or is there anything that like Mavericks fans should keep an eye on while they watch this summer?
Yeah, I think what changed. So if you look at the Olympic team, that was a young team where Luka was the clear leader, and they played what was interesting, a little bit more exciting, up-tempo basketball, Then last season, Goran Dragic came back, and this kind of, they went, I think, if you ask me, through a similar phase that Luka and Kyrie went this season, in terms of chemistry. Not that they would have, bad chemistry or that they wouldn't, but it's like just trying, from going, this was really a team that was focused 100% on Luka, and then Goran came back. So they were like, also their styles of play are completely different. He wants to play really fast, push it. That's his strength. And Luka is like more controllable. Also, both point guards need the ball. So I think last Eurobasket was a little bit about that. I think they will go back to the model that worked in 2000 in the Tokyo Olympics. I don't think Goran will play in this. I think he has also some injury problems, and he is like 37, 38 years old. So that's it. But I think the model in the national team, obviously the competition is a little bit different. Also the rules are different, and just the size, the size and athleticism of the players. So even if you watch NBA, Luka is bullying almost every single player, even in the NBA. It's like it's very hard to guard him. If you're not guarding him like this really strong, I don't know, wing or big. In Europe, that's even harder. So I think just surrounding him with athletic defenders on the perimeter and a good center, which is either a rim threat or a pick and pop big. That's one thing. But I think some of the same challenges, I think, also regarding his game is we will see if they will manage to implement, let's say, an offense that is less Luka dependent. So that's one thing. That's when you watch the team, it's some of the same things that we're watching with the Mavericks.
Before we get you out of here today, as we start to close, I want to ask you this because, as I mentioned before, your brain in terms of how you watch the game and see the game and analyze the game is something that I've come to love and fascinated by. But for you, where did the love of the game start for you? How did you come to, understand the game of basketball? What drew you to the sport and wanted to cover it and obviously be able to discuss it in the way that you do?
Yeah, basketball is just an amazing sport. Yeah, so that's why I think we all love it. Like you said, in all competitions. Also here locally, we had a long history over. Also, for such a small country, a lot of success when it comes to basketball. A lot of NBA players. I mentioned Goran Dragic. He made an All-Star. He made a 4-team All-NBA at one point in his career. Even from my club locally that plays now, you have a Mavs legend, Yogi Ferrell, playing for our team.
Yeah,
but we had a lot of NBA players come, from our town. So we watch these games. So I think Davis Bertans played for our local club at certain time. what Danny Green played one season here, Aaron Baines, so there was a lot of guys, and there were like 5, 6, 7 Slovenians that played in the NBA. I don't know if you guys remember guys like Beno Udrih or Rašan Esterović.
Mm-hmm.
They were the guys that play on some Spurs title teams. So that's one part. But then I would say also, obviously, when Luka came in the NBA, it also coincided with I started also to try to look at the game from a little bit different perspective, mostly from analytics, learned a lot about analytics and also development of the whole thing, how it started like 25 years ago in the NBA and the impact it has on the sport. So by nature, I would say a very curious person. So started to do some of these things in practice, now doing it with some of the coaches here, just some coaching clinics about analytics, how they can do. We are doing some profiles for European players, some of the things. So that to me was when I started to look, like you said, a little bit from a different angle, at the game. And then the thing that I really hate about this whole analytics discussion in the NBA, it's like, as everything, especially on social media, black and white, so either a nerd or, I don't know, somebody who really played and, I don't know, you're a pro player. So I wanted to also understand the context behind analytics and this. So that's when you start to look a little bit more in the X and O stuff, watching the film, trying to learn about the game, why some of the things that you see in the numbers, what is the context behind. So I think it was, let's say, last 5, 6, 7 years, been a really big learning curve also for me. And I really love it. I love to learn about this stuff, about these new games. And this is what I said. So trying to add to the game in the off season. So this is the time where you can learn some of these new things,
Well, I could tell you that you have become a favorite of the MFFLs for Mavs fans because they love your work. They love the way that you break down the game. And really what I think makes and separates you is that you explain it to where most people can kind of just understand it from a basic perspective. Even though you're describing the game itself and breaking down the game, you make it very easy to understand based on what you're seeing and how you're describing it. And I think that's what a lot of Mavs fans appreciate. So I can safely say that this has been an honor for us. I can tell Tim McMahon now, I was like, look, Tim, I had Iztok on my podcast too, just like you had him on yours. So, next time I see him, I'm gonna let Tim know, hey, I got Iztok on my podcast too. So
One of you guys need to come to Slovenia like Tim did. And
that's right. That's right. So
we'll torture you like we did, like I did. You had to go all around these hills, walk.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It looked like Tim was having a good time, and you were showing him a good time out there in Slovenia. So we'll have to at some point make the trip. First of all, beautiful country, like just the images and the pictures that seen throughout the years. Beautiful country in Slovenia, it looks like there. So obviously a lot of picturesque views and whatnot. And I'm sure you being able to live it and see it every day, I'm sure it's a joy for you to kind of show people what Slovenia looks like and some of the views that it has to offer out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's also very small, so you don't need much time to show around. No, I'm joking, but yeah, I mean, as I came, I don't know, I've been now to Dallas last 2 seasons, so I think it's very different, So the country is small, but it's diverse in terms of in this small geographic region. We have like mountains, also the seaside, so a lot of things like in 1.5 or 1 hour drive, which is if you are in the DFW area, it's like just one ride around the city. So that's different.
Yes.
Also, the way of life, let's say, it's a little bit different. But as I said, I'm also working on the other part of our, Slovenia, Texas friendship. Every time I come to Dallas, I take a friend with me, and they go back with additional 5 pounds. then we need to start walking around our hills just to get rid of all the extra weight we get from the barbecue.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Iztok, tell the folks where they can find you and the work that you're doing these days, sir.
Yeah, I think you told it at the beginning. So it's mostly on Twitter and the magazine. I'm working, as I said, it's off season, so it's a little bit slower than usual. but I'm working on something interesting. So I hope it managed to see the day of the light in the next weeks. But until then, I think it will be published on Twitter. So mostly Twitter, yeah.
Well, this has been a joy for us. I'm so glad that we were able to get this worked out. As I mentioned, love the way that you cover the game and talk about the game, and obviously very passionate about this basketball team, Luka Doncic, and what he's done for this franchise. It's been a lot of fun to watch, to see how this team has grown, but more importantly, how the fans have embraced not just him, but also other individuals who cover this team from even outside the United States, just like yourself, who love and cover this team. So thank you so much for really joining us today. It's been an honor and a pleasure for you to join us on the podcast. Iztok, appreciate it, man.
Thank you, guys. And I also appreciate your guys' work. Grant doing great stuff on the Mavs beat. So a lot of things. And Kevin, yeah, so really keep up the good work, and another podcast to follow, to listen to.
Well, we appreciate that. We get the Iztok Franko endorsement on Inside the Mavs. That's what we needed right there. So we appreciate that. Great. This has been Inside the Mavs. Again, you can download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts for free. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you give it a 5-star rating, write a review for the podcast while you're there. And you can also follow Grant on Twitter at Grant Abseth. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports, and make sure you follow Iztok on Twitter at Iztok_Franko. We'll be back next week for another episode of Inside the Mavs. Until then, we'll talk to you later. Peace.